Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Winnifred Tataw. How are you today, Winnie?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing excellent as well, and I am so excited for this conversation with you today. It is an honor to have you on. You are an artist, an author, you are an indie book publisher, and soon to be TV show host of the Win's Literary Lounge. And welcome again, Winnie. I cannot wait to hear about all of this goodness from you. So, why don't you tell us how this journey began for you and what kind of led you to get to this point now?
So, I always had a love and affinity for writing and artwork and creating art and creating stories. And about 8 years ago, I was sitting on the couch with my mom and I was just like, oh, I have this idea. What if there's a prince and he did this and this happened? And she was like, why don't you write this down? You always just keep coming with ideas and stories. Like, why don't you write this down? So I said, okay, I'll try it. I started writing and I wrote until I was like, okay, I think I have a book now. So what do I have a manuscript? What do I do now? And that really is what I would say propelled my literary career and was again just encouragement from my parents and them saying, yeah, just start writing it. Don't just say it, write it, put it to pen to paper. And I kept putting it pen to paper until we're here now 5 years later after I published my first book. And now I have a full business and staff and publishing company after it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, I mean, your business is Wins Books and also your indie publishing. I'm assuming that sort of led after you're publishing your own books, discovering that indie publishing world, and then deciding to launch your own. So, why don't you talk us through a little bit of that as well?
So the indie publishing company is a bit of I wouldn't say too different of a story, but how it came to be is a bit more unique than most indie publishers. So I have always been an indie author. I felt that was the best choice for me when creating my work and finally getting to publish it. And after about 2 years of publishing, I started blogging and creating content and started to also promote other authors through my website, Wins Books. And from there, I met so many different authors and so many different writers. And I came to be the person, if you have a new book or you're a new writer and you need some affordable promotion or a quick spotlight on your book, I was the person to come to and just kept building on that and building that community to the point about, say, a year and a half ago, and say a handful of people started coming up to me and going, hey, Winnie, all of this about publishing and you're doing great and marketing and the whole 9 yards. Can you publish my book? And I said, I don't know. I've only done mine. I don't know if I can publish your book. And it was fine because it was a one-off thing, which I think most indie authors get. But then it kept happening and it kept happening and it kept happening until I got to the decision. I was like, okay, let me do some research. Let me plan this out. Let me see if this is possible or a good venture for me to go into. And I decided it was. And April 2024, we opened our doors for publishing not just my books, but others' writer books. And so far, we've been doing great, signing a lot of great writers onto the publishing company for our story. A lot of indie authors who end up having their own publishing company, it usually comes from their want to, again, break that mold of traditional publishing, really give that opportunity versus I was asked to do this. People came to me and asked me to publish their stories. It wasn't really me going, oh, I'm going to do this because this is my purpose. It was more people telling me, no, this is your purpose. You should do this. And I go, okay, yeah, I think I could do it.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think just to touch back on your support that you had from your parents, it sounds like is tremendous, right? Because so much of when we're growing up, our parents are like wanting to sort of direct the path that we take in our life. Oh, you need to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or whatever. And so I think a lot of people face that kind of expectation of how it should be. And so it sounds like your parents were very supportive of you and taking this writing journey to create these worlds that you do with your books. And I'd love for you to share with us what, because I think you've published 5 books in the series now. Yes?
Yeah.
So tell us about it. And I mean, really, 5 books is a lot.
Yeah.
So congratulations for
Thank you.
that. If somebody's thinking, how do I even start? What do you say to that?
To kind of answer both questions, I'll start with how to start. First thing is you need to have an idea. You need to have an idea of what you want to write. Once you get that, you can start planning out writing. For some people, it takes them 2 weeks to write a full manuscript. Some people, it takes them 12 years. Some people, it's 12 days. No, to like your writing and book journey is going to look completely different than everyone else's because it's your journey. And we all have different life experiences. And again, life happens. So things we have delays, we have accelerations in life. So once you kind of understand that and know that I can just start writing and everything else will fall into place after that. But first you need to do is just write. The editing will come, the publication will come, but it can't happen if you don't actually put pen to paper and get going. So that's what I always say. And I know a lot of people are like, but how do I write? Or how do I don't know how to? And it's, well, you do know how to write. I would hope I know how to write. And again, it's as long as you have something, there's always room for improvement. There are tons of professionals that are here to help, that are open to answering questions you may have. The indie publishing and indie writing community is so great and so full of knowledge and always so welcome and open to helping and lending a hand and giving you connections. So don't be afraid to ask questions too. There's always someone who has an answer or knows somebody who has an answer. And with that too, that's kind of what I try to focus a lot in my writing is that community and connection. The Gods Scion series really is about, if you peel back the fantasy lens, it's about family dynamics and connections and exploring how they look through different siblings and how they look to in different people. Some people who grow up in two-parent homes with multiple siblings or one sibling will still have different childhoods, even though they're raised by the same two parents. And even if you have, say, similar experiences to someone else, say you were raised by a single mother or a single dad, a single parent, and you can still have a completely different experience than someone else who was also raised by a single parent. So really exploring those dynamics and seeing the outcomes of them, seeing how being raised by two parents who may have not been the best, who may have not been the most supportive, versus a parent who's very supportive to the point where it's a bit overbearing, and seeing those outcomes and seeing how that shapes people's outlooks of life and ideologies is really what the center of the God Scion series is, really just exploring different family dynamics and sibling relationships and how these play out and how people's actions really are heavily tied to how they're cared for and nurtured as children into adulthood.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you're absolutely right. Everybody's experience in this life is going to be different, even if they have the same 2 sets of people who are raising them, right? My sister and I have had completely different experiences growing up. And yeah, I mean, it's absolutely accurate what you're saying. And so let's talk about fantasy publishing because it has grown. I mean, I think like exponentially in probably these last maybe 8, 10 years. Yeah. And it's just such a fantastic area. I think I truly enjoy reading the different books in the series. and this type of genre. You're talking about the basics of human experience in growing up in different households. How did you weave that into this fantasy novel?
Yes, how I did that was really focusing on mythology. The series name is called the Gods Scion, and that is to play on both the word scion as a child or a follower. And there are four main gods in the series who kind of watch over their children of Earth. And they play, some of them, not all of them, play a more dynamic role in the lives of the main characters. And you get to see them really fight with that. Sometimes even fight the gods themselves on how much of they say how they have in their daily lives. The main character, Roderick, he is the acolyte of time, and there's only four acolytes. And you get to see not only is he an acolyte and he can control time, he's also a prince. You get to see all of this different layering and dynamics for his family, the pressures his parents put on him, the pressures his society puts on him, the pressures he puts on himself towards his siblings. He is also a middle child. Like I just gave him all the problems, but you get to see how he has to really struggle and find his way in life because the other acolytes are a lot older than him, and he is the youngest one. And then he's also having to deal with, again, having to always be in public eye, having to act a certain way, having to present a certain way, and then also having to put on a shield and mask for his family because he had to be a certain way for them. He has to be the bigger brother or the younger sibling or the mediator or the scapegoat. So he has to wear all these different titles and mask all the time. And you, through again, having this fantasy element of time travel and different gods and mythology and even shape shifting dragons, which is what he is, you get to see how that intertwines with his daily life and how that impacts it personally because of who he is and what he is. He gets scrutinized because he can control time. He's put on a higher pedestal than others. And then some other people put him on a lower pedestal or look down upon him because he's not doing enough with his powers or he's doing too much. So he's just getting pulled every which way. And he's still, again, this is a duty. It was bestowed upon him as a child. He can't get rid of it. He can't not be the acolyte of time. He's the only one. There's only four. He's the only one. And this is a task and duty he has to carry until the end of his lifetime. You get to see again how that really, I don't want to say messes with him, but really impacts his life and his decision making because he not only has to think of just his own choices, but seeing how they affect the world overall because the smallest thing can make such a bigger impact for so many other people because of what responsibilities and duties he holds.
Oh my gosh, it sounds fantastic. I love it. Super cool. The basic of all of that, it's like you can see in people around you in terms of that family dynamics. And like you said, a middle child, and they're often the scapegoat or the mediator. They're trying to make sure everybody is getting along or whatever. And so all of that, I think people can recognize maybe in their own life or in their friends' lives or just experiences that they're seeing in the world. So cool. And all right, so there's now four other books besides that one, yes?
Yes.
And what are the names of the other books in the series? So I know it's God Scion is the name of the whole series, yes?
Yes. Yes. So the first book is Child of Tempest. Second book is Descendants of Time and Death. Third book is The Lone Star Child. Fourth book is The Sisterhood of Secrets. And the fifth book that was just released is called The Viper's Bloodline Awakened.
Oh my gosh, that sounds exciting. Well, thank you for sharing those. I will be sure to include the details in the show notes for the listeners to check out because I just sounds so fantastic. I love it. Well, can we talk about now being a publisher in the space? And I know launching this as a business is relatively new for you, but you as an indie author have experienced this. What are some of the unique challenges that you have faced in the publishing world and maybe influence you to begin your own publishing company?
So, one thing is just the type of writer I am. For a lot of traditional publishers, they follow either trends or what everyone is reading to really curate what they decide to publish. And if you don't really meet that category or if you don't really fit in that mold, most likely you're not going to be picked up by them. And also, this waiting to hear back was, I think, the hardest thing, having to try to get a query, get an agent, and then from there, having to actually start putting in bids. And then from there, having to decide whether or not like your book is good enough for X amount, and then seeing royalty count. And again, really learning about how I feel like for a lot of the artistic industry, or I also include entertainment because books are entertaining industry, it can be very predatory to people who don't know about it, who may not have as much information or have done research, to again, certain deals, to contracts, to what you're allowed to write or what you're allowed to speak upon in your own book. Sometimes you can send away all your rights to a publisher where you can get your name taken off the book and they put someone else's. And I mean, you assign those away. You can't say anything about it. Sometimes it's just your royalty. Maybe you're splitting it and you're getting 1% of your revenue. Again, that might be great if you're selling thousands of books, but if you start calculating and getting into the numbers, it may not be a lot of money that you're actually getting from that. So that's really what started me to really look into indie publishing because, again, even like you said, it's still so new for the artistic realm. I think in books, especially, it's one of the oldest forms of entertainment. And yet, the independent author and writing sector is so new. You didn't really hear about independent or indie authors 20 years ago. You have with musicians, you have with artists, visual artists, you have with performers and actors, but indie publisher, an indie book, no. And even 20 years ago, it wasn't something that was supported or revered as something like, oh, you're an indie publisher or you're an indie writer. It was looked down upon. It was thought as, oh, you just don't have what it takes to be a quote unquote real author. So you had to take the easy way out, which is not the case for anyone who might be thinking that. But again, that's kind of all these things that led to me wanting to publish myself because again, as a Black woman, as a woman from African descent to direct African descent, both my parents came from Cameroon, Africa, just all these other layers. I didn't want to wait to make when I was again popular or until when my writing seemed deemable to be published because I don't know when that would be for them for traditional publication. But I knew if you write a story, there's a reader out there for that story. Every story has a reader. And I knew that I definitely know I have a reader. I mean, everyone loves fantasy. I love fantasy. There has to be at least one other person on the 7 billion people planet to also want to read what I've written. I took the chance after, well, not after doing research. I said, oh, I got this. And I published my book and it was bad because I just jumped into, I literally just edited one time. I submitted it to Amazon and I was like, well, I can just click my feedback, become a New York Times bestseller, become an Amazon bestseller. People are going to buy my books. I'm going to be a millionaire in 3 days. This is easy. And then 3 days came and I was like, my bestseller? Where's my reviews? Where's what's happening? And then when I actually took time and stepped back and read and researched, I said, oh, I have to put in work. It's, of course, easy to just upload everything, upload a book cover, hit publish. Of course, that's easy. That's a few clicks and a few types and a few words, and bam, you have a book. But that doesn't mean you have a good book. That doesn't mean you have a readable book. It doesn't mean you have a quality book. It just means you have a book. And I had to get into the nitty gritty on how I could have a quality book that people would read, people would like to read, and people would know about because me just publishing Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the big storefronts, and even indie bookstores, they get hundreds of thousands upon millions of books published monthly, yearly. I'm just one of thousands that got published on the first day Child of Tempest was published. Thousands. So why did I think I was just going to be the number one? Because I didn't do any marketing. I didn't do any outreach. I didn't do any. I just published and I put a little Facebook post said, "Hey, I have a book out." That was it. And so after learning that I actually do have to market and push for this book more than what I had to do already, I had to come to the decision if I wanted to put in all that work, if I really did want to take the time to learn and understand these things, because I definitely wanted to write another book in the series, but I thought to myself, I said, there's no point of doing this if I'm not actually going to put in the work and effort to make sure it's successful. Because again, then I'm just writing to write, which again, that's great. But if I'm expecting to get sales, if I'm expecting to get readers and get connections, I'm going to have to put in work. And after sitting and talking about it, I decided that yes, I am going to put in the work. And I've been doing that since now 5 years.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Winnie, thank you so much. There's so much great information in what you shared. And I just want to point out again, we don't know what we don't know. And the contract negotiation is a huge thing. And you shared about signing your rights away, and not even realizing that's what you're doing, or negotiating your royalties. And there's so much involved in that as a writer, author, let alone be getting that publishing side of it. That's a whole nother sphere. But for somebody who is thinking about writing, you made so many great points. You can't just write a book and throw it up on Amazon and think it's immediately going to be a bestseller.
Yeah.
I mean, it might. There could be a million and one chance, but most likely that's not going to be the case, right? And so you have to take the time to really market and get the word out as much as you can in as many places as you can, right? So that people can discover the book. So great stuff there. Thank you for sharing all of that journey that you went through so that others can learn about maybe some pieces that they should consider as they're taking this next steps or journey to writing a book. So that's great stuff, Winnie. Thank you. And something else that you said in there that I wanted to touch on, and it was the writing and editing part. And I've had another guest on who also was talking about she thought that writing part would be the hardest part and that the editing would be the easiest part. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Was it harder for you to write or edit your books?
Edit. Oh my god.
Edit.
Oh my goodness. It's always, for me, always editing, because you now have to be faced with all the issues in what you've written. And I always say you have to get an editor, not just your best friend, not just your mom, like an actual editor, someone who has experience writing, or excuse me, editing, or background in it. You have to sit down and look at your work and look at all the flaws in it. And sometimes that hurts. You're like, wow, I thought I was making sense. Or, oh, I thought my characters were connecting. Or I didn't know I had a plot hole in here. Oh my goodness. Now I have to rewrite 3 more paragraphs to make sure this makes sense. Or I got to change the ending of the book. Editing can be a hard and stressful time because, again, a lot of writers have imposter syndrome. A lot of creatives do. And when you are now faced that, okay, this is time to now, we have to pick out all the issues. We got to pick out all the problems with your creation. It can be like, well, I don't want to do this. And especially when you don't know editors, or you don't know how to find a good editor or where to start. Everyone who edits, they have different levels of how they communicate and how they express their edits. Some people, I've heard stories where they're like, oh, I'm just going to send you a list of everything that's wrong. And that's it. And you're like, oh, well, why did I even bother to write if that, I haven't done anything correct ever? And then you have some editors who are very flaky or may not do the best job at editing. And now you have to do 3 more rounds of editing to fix what they started. So it can be such a challenging process, especially for a new writer or somebody who, again, just doesn't know where to start. It can be stressful because, again, if you're going through the route, you have to be on to pay for your editor, and they can be expensive because, again, this is usually someone's business. It's their full-time job, and you need to pay them so they can eat and keep a roof over their head too. And sometimes it can cost up to a couple thousand grand to get your book edited. You may still not it's like how it turns out. Or you may have it where if you're doing traditional publishing where they take care of the editing, but you don't really have a say so in what gets changed. And now you're a little upset because you're like, this isn't my story anymore. This doesn't feel like my book. You took out so much of it that it doesn't feel like me. Or again, you don't know where your book is in the editing process. If the editor has started, if you can really communicate with them, and maybe you can. And again, you guys just don't connect. There's butting heads, but you, again, really don't have much say so. But on both ends, there's still, of course, positives because with every editor, especially great editors, which there are a lot of them out there, you get to learn more about your writing style and how you can better improve your writing, how you can better start seeing more errors as you go. And again, you get a good editor. You guys can, I mean, you can make the process a lot easier for yourself. You understand it, and your editor can go hand in hand on making sure you get the best book possible. And again, that goes for both traditional or the indie route. And I think the kind of the hardest thing too is realizing and understanding that no book is 100% perfect. I mean, we have example that comma and some people use it, some people don't. I've seen people argue about whether or not you should only write in third person versus first person. I write in both. So I I have no say so. I do both. So I am like, well, if you don't like the third person story, I got the first person for you. People who notice if your quotations are curly or straight and which one is better there. If you need to indent your first paragraphs or at the beginning of a new chapter or not. So there's all these different factors that play into, again, editing and how we write and how we read. Again, even just that if you're writing in a different language or even in the same languages, slang terms, we live in the US. There are so many different regions that have different terminologies and slang that is unique to that region that someone, I mean, you live in the South, that some northerner slang and terms. I'm like, what are you guys talking about up there? I'm lost. Once you understand that if you can edit your book all day long, it will not be perfect, and that's okay. We just want it readable. You want it readable for your reader. So don't look for perfection, just look for readability.
Thank you so much for going into that depth of that. And initially it felt sort of discouraging, like, why would you even write if the editor's going to tear it all apart? But then as you continued explaining, it was so great to see that it can become a learning process for you to improve your writing when you take the input that the editor is giving you. And so I think that's fantastic. And yes, your points about the two different types, whether you go with traditional publishing or indie, and there's a cost associated with doing this yourself versus with a publishing company, but you may not have been selected to go with a traditional publishing. And so there's a lot of factors there as well. But if you can become partners in that editing, writing process, you can make your book better and your writing is improved. And so I love that idea. And so don't give up, right? Don't give up writing your story. Just work with a good editor. And I know you offer editing services, yes, through the publishing company?
We do. We
Yeah.
have, I think now, keep adding more people. Think we're now at 8 different editors. I could be wrong. I'm good with writing. I'm not good with math. But we do have amazing team of editors who do everything from developmental editing to sensitivity writing and editing to just doing proof and read line editing and copy edits. So we have some great editors, and I always try to make sure when I'm connecting an editor with a writer that there is something where, again, there can be a connection or partnership where the writer doesn't feel like, I don't want my writers to be intimidated by their editors. And I don't want my editors to feel like they are talking to brick walls when they're trying to connect and really help out the writer. So I always try to make sure I pair them with an editor I think would be best for them personality wise and help them connect and feel more comfortable in asking questions and getting to know their editor and the writer vice versa.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's so important that they're on the same page and the direction they want to go with this, and that the communication between them is so important in order to make that become a success, right? If you are talking to somebody who's not going to take your advice, and you're not going to get anywhere. And so I think that's true regardless of the industry, right? If you're
Yes.
somebody is not going to take the suggestions and advice that you're offering them, there's nowhere to go from there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that communication and the working together to carry it forward and make it and something that readers are going to want to read is the ultimate goal.
Yes. So again, and this is for all writers and authors. These editors are not your employees unless, again, you are a publishing company and you actually did employ them and you're getting taxes for them and everything. Outside of that, they are not your employees. You're hiring them. So it should be a partnership. It should feel like a partnership, not a dictatorship where you're like, hey, I need you to do this. Hey, can we talk today? I want to go over some edits. I want to go over something in this chapter, or I think I need to revise this. So, going at it where you want a partnership with your editor, again, not an employee boss dynamic, because you're not an employee boss. Again, unless you are paying them monthly or biweekly or weekly, this is not your employee. This is someone you're partnering to help better your work.
Good point. For sure. That's important to remember. I want to talk a little bit more about the marketing side of it, and really, especially for indie authors who don't have the backing of larger publishing houses who, not that they're doing all the marketing for you. You absolutely need to be doing your own marketing as well, but there's a little bit more that they do. Yes.
Yeah.
So for indie authors or people who are going to be self-publishing, you need to do a lot of your own marketing or all of your own marketing, really. Maybe talk us through some effective strategies or like tips or suggestions that you have for how you can be marketing your book.
Yeah. So also really start for marketing itself. Some publishers, whether it be traditional too, you might still end up doing all of your marketing yourself because you have to also understand you're not the same way when you're posting or you're uploading your book to Amazon, you're not the only book being published that day. You're not the only author they're publishing in that week or that day too. Everyone has an agent who has maybe upped the deal or has discussed negotiate their own plans and demands and things like that. So maybe you got sadly the short end of the stick where you have to take on more marketing. But what I think the best way with going with that, whether you have to do a lot of marketing yourself or not, is having a marketing plan, a book launch plan. After you have finished writing and you have a manuscript, now it's time to say, okay, let's start editing. Let's start deciding, even before editing, do you want to go to a traditional publisher or do you want to do an indie route? And once you start doing that, start building out a plan. If you are with a traditional publisher, you're going to have an agent and you guys can work in tandem to make sure that happens. Versus if you're indie, as soon as you decide, okay, I want to be an indie author, we got to start our indie marketing plan. So that is, okay, where are we going to find our readers? How are we going to do that? When are we going to start? I say start as soon as you can, as soon as you have a plan, social media content, a website. Are you doing in person interviews? Are you going to be doing workshops? Are you going to, if indie writing is not at the moment your full time job, can you market through your job? Are there ways to connect that? How much time are you going to allot to marketing? Is it just a weekend thing? Are you doing it every week or every day of the week? So, really pushing towards that and understanding that I think is the most key aspects. And once you really have figured out your marketing plan, if you set that out, I usually I say the best is at least plan out for a year up until when you're publishing your book. Then I think after that, you can really, again, start getting into it and understanding it and investing into different avenues, whether it be social media, whether it be PR, whether it be outsourcing certain things, whether it be looking to the different ventures and ways you can market yourself and how that works within your genre. I keep saying research because knowledge is power. You need to know how to reach an audience. Look at what other indie authors in your genre are doing. Look at what's working for them. Look at what's not working for them and see how you can also build upon that to make a better marketing plan for yourself and a better book launch overall.
Oh, good stuff, Winnie. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that you're right. You probably need to start sooner than you think you need to start, right?
Yes.
Yes, you're writing your book. You're maybe to the point where it's been edited and you're getting it. You should be probably starting to launch a website and begin the social media posts and stuff before you're even like publishing it, right?
Oh, definitely. Some people, I mean, as soon as you start writing, if you are dead set, hey, I'm going to be an indie author, okay, it's time to start now. Start marketing now because unless you already have a large platform, you have to get your name out there. You have to push and really set yourself. What makes you different from all the other fantasy authors? What makes you different from all the other romance authors? And again, people love, especially you're a small business. People love small businesses. They love to learn their stories and journeys. So if people can follow you as you're writing, as people can follow you as you're about to publish, there's so many authors where I get so excited. I get to see them go from writing to now publication. I'm like, yay, I love this for you. So people love that. And that helps them feel more connected with you and want to support you and want to support your endeavors when they get to see the progress behind that. So definitely, as soon as you decide how you want to publish, is when you need to start marketing for that venue or avenue.
Yeah, good stuff. And I think you're right. People really do love to see the success that we can have, right? The journey through the process. Okay, I've decided I'm going to do this thing. And people want to support you and cheer you on and see that happen for you. And the connection that you can make with the people who are kind of your cheering squad, I think is fantastic too. So great stuff, Winnie. Can we just talk real quick about writing being a solitary process and how a lot of writers can feel very isolated because you're working on this stuff by yourself. And what can writers do to help not feel so lonely as they're going through the writing process?
The best way is joining writer groups. There are so many different writer groups. In Wins Books, we have a free writers membership where we also host workshops. So there are so many different things going on Facebook and joining writer groups. And Facebook is vast. You can do it as niche as you need to be. If you want to do it by ethnicity, if you want to do it by region, if you want to do it by genre, if you want to do it by the type of bands you and the other writers like to listen to, you can be as niche as you need to be and finding that support. Again, doing book clubs, doing in person meetings, and trying to find a circle of people who are supporting you, who will, again, be your in person or real life cheerleaders too, and letting them have updates about your book and your writing and saying, hey, I have writer's block. Can we go out and eat? And they're like, yeah, sure. If you really need again, a space where you feel connected, I would say always try to find either in person or virtual writing groups or book clubs that again they can be in your area, they can be out of the country, out of the state. It all depends on you and how you want to find your supportive tribe. And through that, you some writer groups, I know they do challenges like, okay, we're going to write 1,000 words in 1 week, or we're going to write 10,000 words in 1 month. So you can join these challenges, you can join these groups and better hone your writing and get information and get a supportive group of people who also know where you're coming from because these are also writers. So they're going to know the struggles of writer's block. They're going to know the struggles of being isolated and having to write. They're going to know the struggles of waking up in 3 in the morning or staying up till 3 in the morning to be like, oh my gosh, I have this great idea. I got to write it down before I lose it. So you get to have that connection and you get to foster it and grow it how you feel it's best suited for you and your writing. Again, you don't feel so isolated and lonely as you're going on this process because it shouldn't feel that way, especially that we have so many friends just in our phones that are always there through social media. You definitely don't make writing a lonely process. There's always room for you at a writer's group or a membership or a program or even a residency as well that you can connect with other people and writers to better improve yourself and again not feel so lonely on your writing journey.
Love it. More great suggestions there, Winnie, for sure. I think that when you said you connect with other writers who know what you're going through, they understand writer's block. They understand if you've stumbled into some point in your plot and you don't know how to get out of it or whatever. They maybe have experienced that too, and you can talk through where to go from there. And so I think that those are some great suggestions, and you're absolutely right. I mean, Facebook, for what it is, amazing for connecting people. And there are so many great groups on there that you can find somebody who's working on something similar, if not the same as what you're doing, and can help you stay connected. And you could offer each other so much more. So it's a fantastic suggestion. I want to talk just real quick about the upcoming TV show that you're gonna be doing. Again, it's Wynn's Literary Lounge. So tell us really quickly what listeners could find if they were to start watching.
Yes. So Wynn's Literary Lounge is a place where it's supposed to be full of magic and coziness where you get to explore new writers and authors, as well as amazing books in our cozy lounge. And we introduce you to them and we do interviews with these writers and authors and highlight important things that are going on in the literacy world, as well as things that are going on with Wynn's books and how we're trying to continue to spread magic and connection through creativity with our audience and with you guys and the newcomers. The Wynn's Literary Lounge is literally a lounge where you just get to come back, sit down, read with us, talk with us, and get to enjoy new readers, or excuse me, new authors and new books every month and explore them and with us. And again, find the magic in connection.
Oh, excellent. And so that's gonna be launching in October. So in real time, if you're listening to this as it goes live, it will already be in October. So hopefully your first episode will be up and running and the listeners can check it out. I'll be sure to include the details in the show notes. Winnie, I always love to ask my guests if there's other books or podcasts that they think are beneficial or influential that the listeners should check out. Do you have some that you'd like to suggest that we take a look at?
Yes, I do. It is from one of our PR partners. Her name is Lillian, and Lillian is fantastic. And she wrote a book that was, I believe it was launched this year, and it's called The Powerful Publicity Prescription. And it's for those who are trying to really amplify their status on writing, publishing in the sense of the PR world. And I think that's great for people who need to really boost up where to start, how to start, and what tools and tips you really need. I believe there's another book called, I think it's from 20 to 50K, and it's about, and I could be getting it wrong, but it's about, again, really setting up indie authors to success for how they can really launch their indie writing careers and start making profit from it and making a community on the indie side of things. Let's see, there is one book that I read that is called Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I love it. It is such a fun read. It is not an indie book, but it's still a great book. Another book I would say for those who are trying to look for more indie books is, oh my gosh, I'm gonna link on her name. Oh, it's called No One's Gonna Take Her Soul Away from my amazing author friend. Her name is Amanda B. Weaver. There we go. And it is a great horror slash speculative fiction novel that she released. And it, again, amazing. And if you are into that genre and if you're into it, I got my copy. So I'm excited to read. Definitely something to look forward to. And then lastly, I'm going to shout out a very amazing author. Her name is Montrez, and she also does fantasy as well and speculative fiction. And her book is called Errant, and it is also a really great novel, which I also have to finish reading. And it's about YA women's empowerment, just a very fun and dynamic novel. And she is such a fun and dynamic person to read about and read with. So definitely check out those stories and those authors. I have a plethora who I'm forgetting, and we could really sit here all day long if I just go through all my to be read list authors and recommendations because I have a lot and I get suggested a lot, but I think that's great. So definitely, if you guys want some more recommendations, please hit me up, email me, message me. Trust me, I know an author for every genre now.
That's fantastic, Winnie. I will for sure include the details in the show notes for the listeners to find those books. Good suggestions for fantastic, that fantasy kind of reading. And also, like you said, one of them was sort of a horror genre. So that's cool too. Is there any podcasts that you want to suggest that the listeners check out?
Yes, one that I love and sponsor is called LOL Podcast or Love of Literature. And it's by these two amazing women, Miss J and Shri. And they meet and talk with all types of literary professionals, from authors to editors to book publishers to marketers. And they get to really deep dive into their process, into their books, into their stories. And it's just a great thoughtful podcast where, again, you get to really learn and find this. They just find such interesting people to connect with. Another one who I also love is called Soft Lore Podcast with Laura. She is such a fun dude, and it's a very fun, cozy podcast, very geared towards fantasy too. And just again, Laura's it's just a very calm and peaceful podcast, just something to listen to. And you feel like you're just talking to a friend when you're listening to her podcast, because she's just great and can be very funny. So I would say those two are on my list of top podcasts to look out for and listen to.
Yeah, excellent. Great recommendations again. Thank you so much. I'll include the details as well. And so, lastly, Winnie, before we close out the show, would you share with us and the listeners if they want to follow your journey, find your books, just learn more, pick your brain, how would they be able to find you and learn more about it?
Yes. So you can find me at winsbooks.blog. So that's WINS books.blog or winsbooks.publishing.com. Sorry, I've been saying those for so long. I'm starting to mix them up. And also my email is info@winsbooks.blog. I'm on every social media platform: Instagram, Facebook, X, YouTube, Pinterest. I'm on all of them. TikTok, all at Wins Books or Wins Books Publishing. TikTok is the only one where it's Wins Book Publishing. The rest are at Wins Books. And you can come join my pink parade of fun, magic, and connection and community. And please, if you have any questions, please reach out. I'm always happy to answer them. And again, help connect you to people. If I don't know the answer, I know someone who does.
So much, Winnie, for sharing that. I will detail all that information in the show notes. Again, this has been so delightful. I have enjoyed our conversation truly. Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful information with us. I appreciate your time and this knowledge. Thank you.
Yes, I had so much fun, Desiree. Thank you for having me. It was great to get to talk about just all aspects of writing. I always love to talk about it, and now really talk about publishing and getting to educate people on it is always a delight too.
Yes. Thank you again. And we'll talk more soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.